Welcome back to All the Horrible Things, episode 57, The Pope's Exorcist Part 2. We're actually going to talk about The Pope's Exorcist. If you missed it, the last one, we kind of talked about the films and the tropes that led to this puppy here, starring old Russell Crowe. We thank you for being here, beloved listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as you're wont to do. All right,
yeah,
so right off the bat, how many stars you giving this one, The Pope's Exorcist? Which is on VOD now, might be in like second run theaters, possibly at this point.
Yeah, I'm torn 2.5 or 3.
2.5 is generous. I'm giving it 2.
Okay. Because I do think that this was a fun.
It was fun is a good word for it. Definitely a good word for it. Is it one you need to see in the theater? Probably not. But no. I like when Russell Crowe kind of takes on strange roles. Do you remember that one where he was like the road rage character?
I love that movie.
That was fun. I kind of like it when he's in these more genre films because I think it was a missed opportunity that he didn't actually get to follow through with his Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde in the Monsterverse that was never realized, thanks to The Mummy, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's Father Amorth, based on a real dude, who was just a little history, because I also watched the William Friedkin, so the guy who actually directed The Exorcist, directed this documentary on Father Amorth, and followed him into a real exorcism and filmed it. It was the first time anyone had been allowed to film an exorcism, and when he asked, Amorth had to think about it, and then he came back to him and said, all right, I'll let you film it, but no production people, just you, just a camera that you're holding. But then when you get there with him, there's literally like 30 people in the room with them who are chanting along with him as he's doing some of the rite. And I will say, I am certainly not a believer, and I was not turned or converted, but there's a really weird aspect of this exorcism because he does it to this woman called Christina, and she does go kind of like in and out of herself, and then when she is displaying the demonic part, the voice, it sounds like there's a special effects on it, but I don't think Friedkin would do that because that would be so dishonest. I don't think so. But it sounds really, really scary and not of human capacities. Like there's this extra layer there that I can't.
Which is fun.
I'm going to try it's going to be hard to hear, but let me just play this scream of this woman. Do you hear that underlaying? I don't know how it sounds like it's machine made, sort of thing, where there's this extra echo reverb there that doesn't make sense coming from a human voice. And I don't know. Maybe she has an implant in her throat or something. It's really hard for me to buy into it. But I will say that he then talks to neuroscientists about it. He shows them the tape and they listen to it and they admit, we don't know what's going on with that guttural voice thing. That's not something that we can explain physiologically. And most of them were just listen, I'm not going to discount anything. We don't have all the answers to everything in the world. But when it boiled down to it, most of them put it in the category of what is called a dissociated trance disorder, which, it's just the voice that confuses me more than anything else. I didn't expect to have any sort of whoa factor when I watched it, but it admittedly left me pausing a little
questioning
bit, a little bit, and just it was very strange. And I'm trying to logically figure out how she was doing what she was doing with her voice because it was really freaky,
right? Because in cinema, there are rules within the exorcist genre that, and I guess it's real, quote unquote, real life exorcists believe it as well, is that for somebody to actually be considered possessed, they have to have knowledge that they wouldn't normally have.
Right.
That could be a language that they've never spoken before, or just information that they have, like, that they didn't have before. And that's probably what you're describing in this voice is something that they didn't have before. And that's why it's so interesting. And I think that's another thing that people really like about this genre is that there is this mystery to it that they really want you to believe is real, because it's fascinating, the idea that a human possessed by a demon or the devil could, have these abilities.
Yeah.
It's almost like a superhero movie.
Right. Yes. A demon superhero movie of sorts. And not like Shazam, as he does do a little bit.
No.
All right, let's talk about the Pope's Exorcist. It opens with a classic trope of somebody's possessed and you want to trick that demon into getting into another body, like we see in The Exorcist when Father Karras throws himself out the window to save
he
Regan.
Really coaxes this thing like, oh yeah? I bet you couldn't possess that pig.
Yes.
And then the demon's like,
you think you're a big shot, eh, demon? You think you're real cool. Why did you show me?
It's childlike almost, but was entertaining. Poor pig, by the way.
Yes.
But really, I guess it was a fun way of starting the movie.
Good opener. Definitely good opener.
Yeah.
I was invested. Russell Crowe comes in with, all the pomp that he can do so well. And I liked it. And we move on to kind of dealing with the bureaucracy, I would say, of where he stands in the Vatican power structure, which I really like. The bureaucracy stuff is something I almost wanted them to dwell more on than they did.
Yeah.
Because that was the newer angle that I hadn't really seen before in one of these films. Because he's such a larger-than-life character. He kind of doesn't listen to, I don't know what you would call it, this panel of top dog priests,
like elders, almost elders.
Yes. Although ironically, the guy who was really in charge seemed like he was the youngest, and he was just kind of like
Cardinal,
this silly
Cardinal
prick.
Sullivan.
Yeah, who was not okay with what his process is, and you taught the devil, you shouldn't be taunting the devil, whatever he was saying about it. I did like that stuff though. I didn't hate it.
I agree. It adds structure to this organization, which is kind of makes it cool. But I often wonder, like, was that also damaging to the story? Because you think that they would just want to rid the world of all demonic evil.
Yeah.
And then this guy's trying to like end exorcisms. So I thought that was a little counterintuitive, but I guess for the sake of the storyline, you needed to have a villain that wasn't actually the devil.
That's true. Yeah. And he does have his confidant there. And then, it's not really a spoiler, but in the end, obviously, this guy comes to terms that this, prick. What did you say is a cardinal?
I think I think that's Cardinal Sullivan.
Okay, Cardinal Sullivan. And then he kind of like gives up his position, goes on like a pilgrimage or whatever. And then the confidant of Amorte does take over, which is good. Because in real life, he was a beloved figure in all of Italy. People just adored this guy. He was a rock star in Italy, pretty much,
Yeah. Well, they try to show that a little bit. And it may have been my favorite part about the movie is when Russell Crowe is just riding around Italy on his little scooter.
Cuckoo.
Cuckoo to the girls. And they thought it was hilarious. And I think that we needed a little bit more of that to be like, this guy's a celebrity.
Yes. And you know what? We talked about there's not a lot of humor, but I think Russell brought as much humor as you could to this real life figure, because that's something he actually did. He would always do cuckoo to the devil is what he was doing. He was like, making fun of the devil sort of thing. I ain't scared of you.
Taunting him like you just said earlier. Yeah.
Exactly. Which I definitely enjoyed. So yeah, ultimately I did like he also acknowledged to the panel that, most of these aren't legitimate exorcists and people just need to be tricked themselves into thinking they've been liberated of this problem. So he's pragmatic while also being a believer. So it was easier to glom onto him as a figure than anyone we saw in the previous ones we discussed. I would even argue more so than Karras and Exorcist. You glom onto Russell Crowe's Amorth.
Yeah.
Possibly because it's rooted in a real character and you have characterizations that are drawn from the real man. Making it that much richer. But let's talk about the family.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly need, the victims, and this kind of felt like they were taking it from like this Conjuring universe, this
Yes.
idea that it's a family moving into a new home, yet it's a castle, old chapel, whatever.
Yes.
I think
So she inherits an abbey, I think.
An abbey. Thank
And
you. Yes.
An abbey in
Yes.
Spain. Another thing is ginormous. They don't really give any context for that, do they?
No. Yes, they do. The husband who had passed, his family had owned this
Okay.
abbey for centuries. So it must have been after the church had abandoned it. But clearly there's money too, because they're renovating this thing, which would cost millions.
Yes, that I don't get at all, because I mean, I actually liked the mom a lot. We've seen her in
Yes.
a lot on Netflix, like Bly Manor and Midnight Mass. I found her believable. Nobody's going to compete with the mama in Exorcist, right? You got Ellen Burst in there. You can't live up to that. But this actress, I'm trying to remember her name here, Alex Esso, does a really good job, given she's trying to live up to so much in this genre,
Right.
I didn't hate her, but I didn't love the daughter.
I
that
thought
much.
the daughter was an interesting character.
It was just a little too angsty teen for me. I don't feel like they gave her any depth. It had nothing to do with the actress. It just had to do with the depth of the character wasn't there.
Agreed.
And I got to tell you, so it's ultimately their youngest son, Henry, who's the one that gets possessed in this film. And
Because he had experienced something tragic, right?
Right. He had witnessed his father being impaled in a car accident through the skull by some pole or something. So that,
Right,
that's one of the tropes in all these films. You got to be vulnerable to these demons to get into you. And Exorcist is the case of Reagan's father disappearing and, having the divorce. And of course, Rosaria in the right having been raped by her father. And now we got this poor kid, Henry, whose dad was, killed in front of him. But I got to say, this kid, I thought he was possessed even before he was possessed.
I know. A very interesting young man. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good casting, but also maybe not the best directing, when you really should have probably had the boy come off a little bit sweeter before. But I mean, he also had stopped speaking in the script. So like after his dad died, he sort of became just,
catatonic,
Yeah.
Yes. So he was really interesting to watch, and what's funny is like he wasn't talking, but he was still trying to scare his sister. You remember that mask moment?
That mask, yeah.
Later she gets kind of like haunted with these knocks that she thinks is him. So he's kind of a little devil boy himself prior to actually being the devil boy.
See, the knocks bothered me because that was something I just keep thinking they're pulling stuff from The Conjuring or Insidious. And I think the knockings was just too easy.
Yes.
I think it was an opportunity to make it a little bit scarier. The knocks were not scary in this movie.
No.
And I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah, and again, it's a consistency issue. I don't understand how some things were possible before he pulled the cap off of the cellar, which ultimately explains why there's a demonic force at this abbey, which I actually did like the backstory, which ultimately there was this exorcist for the priest that, he was possessed himself back when the Spanish Inquisition was, started. So he was this devil within the Exorcist, convinced then those in charge of the church to then go on the Spanish Inquisition to convert or find the heretics and just murder. I found that very interesting. So this is like where
Agreed.
This spirit was kind of like housed. But things were going on before that cap to the cellar was opened. And then once that cap was opened, suddenly he had even more power. It was just a little unclear how
confusing.
It was all, mechanized. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's a lot of things, like I said, that were borrowed. And this was basically just a haunted house, right? There's something in the basement. And
Right.
I don't know. I think I wanted more mystery, and I think the thing I really wanted out of this movie was to make Father Amorth more of like an Indiana Jones type character.
Yes.
You know?
This is another serious problem I have with these movies is you're dealing with the bad guy who's always bedridden. You know what I mean? We have these kids that are just stuck in bed. And in this case of Henry, they didn't even tie him down. If he's really this evil creature within, why isn't he like scampering around just slaying? I don't understand. We're always stuck in a bed. And if you are going to be stuck in a bed, you better be tied up like Reagan in The Exorcist, because otherwise it's not making any sense to me.
Yeah, why isn't this kid strolling the halls at night? The weirdest thing that happens in this movie that I was like, that was weird, but I actually think it was a good character direction is when Henry grabs his mom's boob.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
You know,
I will say there are a couple of moments with the demon in him that are good. The boob grab and then the face scrape down.
The face scratching, yeah. We needed more of that. And then you've got a reason to tie the kid down because he's not acting himself. He would never have grabbed his mom. He never would have hurt himself. Maybe this kid needs to be tied up.
Yes, I agree. And the one part I didn't like in terms of the demon inside of him was that just like in The Exorcist, he has this raised skin and it says hate.
Yeah.
And I just like, pick something better than just hate. What is this, like neo-Nazi stuff? It's like, I don't get it. It doesn't feel demonic to me.
A massive trope across all of these movies. They do it in the other one I had just watched, Pray for the Devil.
Oh yeah.
They do it with, there's a pregnancy scene in that where it's basically the same thing where there's something inside, which is that makes a lot of sense that there's something, but you need to be creative. You just don't.
And again, we have him vomiting something up. I did like this one because you have like this baby cardinal or whatever it is, this baby bird that comes out. That was a good scene, when you get the big lump in the neck, another, standard trope.
And they did a good job of connecting that bird back to Father Amorth's past and like, oh, that's the thing that is connecting this person to possession, is that they have knowledge beyond themselves. Like this kid had no idea that Father Amorth and the other girl earlier had the bird,
Right.
So, I mean, yeah.
Another instance that I did enjoy, the best probably moment that the daughter had was when, it really amps up and she gets the call from her dead dad, said, "You're all going to die." I like that. Granted, it's not anything new. But what was a little bit more new in these kind of films, you see in other stuff, was then when she kind of like was then a conduit with the kids sitting next to him and they were synchronized talking. I thought that makes good. Sense. That was a little freaky. What I didn't like is then they just rip off the head spinning thing with her. So ultimately Henry is able to then manipulate her into twisting her neck around. She'd be dead. She should be dead. You know what I'm saying? I just don't buy it then when she's dropped on the ground and everything's fine. She doesn't even have a neck crick. Come on. Something's a little awry there. I didn't think it was necessary. Do something else.
No.
Like with the moms with the invisible force hand being choked on the wall. Something like that. I didn't get that. But I did like the synchronized talk.
I thought that was a really cool scene. And it probably should have been introduced a little bit earlier, and it probably should have lasted a little bit longer.
Yes. What did you feel about the relationship between our underling priest, Father Escobar, who's initially thrown out because this what is that? Amadeus. It's something like that. What's the name of the demon?
Yeah.
Asmodeus.
Same thing, really.
Throws him out because he wants the big dog. Because this is where it gets a little strange. Ultimately, priest. This demon is trying to, set things in motion. It has a plan. It has a deeper plan. And that's something that I appreciated. I just got a little confused in the way that it was enacted. Because the Pope himself does send Father Amorte to take care of this exorcism. But then when he's away, the Pope gets sick himself. After just reading about what was happening with Amorte, what was going on there? Why was the Pope suddenly sick?
I'm also confused. I think there has to be like a stronger meaning here that was just not like explained or chopped out, because you have the Pope basically discovering what's going on, maybe like the plan of this demon, and then he says, del Gabriele. And then we do learn in this moment that Father Amorth is smart enough to have figured this out on his own, but there's no reason, there's no connection between him and the Pope in that moment, where it would have made more sense if, like, earlier on, there was some sort of like connection, a moment where they're connected, like, go with God and I will be there with you, or something.
Right, because I think the ultimate plan of Asmodeus was to get into Russell Crowe, which he ultimately does, but then to do a similar thing that this priest from the Spanish Inquisition did, kind of guide the Pope to do evil things, as, you know, the hand of the king sort of thing. But what is the point then of killing the Pope, who's so close to Russell Crowe's character, who would listen to him if he came back seeming like himself, but with this ill intent? It didn't have any congruency for me that it didn't line up, you know?
No, I mean, even if they would have explained that, like, and this would never happen, but, like, it's not even that, like, that Father Amorth was, like, next in line to take over. Like, that would have made more sense.
Yes.
But you're right. They needed to explain that better, because it was kind of a cool storyline to find out that the Spanish Inquisition was guided by the devil.
That was awesome. No,
that was great.
This is the sort of stuff that should have been focused on a little bit more, because there are long, drawn-out fights like there are in all of these that, you know, could have been pinched a little bit for more story, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, what I was hoping for is that there was going to be that twist on the name. When he first started getting sick, I'm like, oh shit, so this was all to leave the Pope vulnerable so this thing could get into the Pope himself, and then the Pope's exorcist is literally the exorcist trying to exorcise the Pope. I thought they were going to give us something like that, which would have been cool. See the Pope himself be all
right. You know? Maybe they're setting that up for the sequel or something, but I mean, because they almost did set it up for a sequel, and then almost kind of like stamped that out by saying, you know, by going on with the history, like, then Father Amorth did this and then died in this year. You're like, all right, well, don't give me that information. Yeah. If you really want to make this a sequel, which it kind of felt like they did. Do
you think so? I never really got the feeling they wanted to go sequel with it.
Oh, I did. When they come back to the underground layer, and he's got this young priest with him, and it was like this James Bond moment where they're like back in headquarters and they're talking to like about like, here's what's happening, and then he's like, here are the other locations in the world where we've got to stamp out this evil. Sounds like a job for you, Father. And then he's like, what if there were two of us? I'm like, sequel. Sequel, right?
That's fair. That's totally fair. I feel like they exhausted all the tropes, right? Because you got the Western medicine first being consulted before we get the exorcist, and I do like how they always kind of compare. And they especially do it in the documentary by Friedkin. Essentially, an exorcist for someone that is really believing is not that far off from psychiatrists, and you can't really discount that if they believe that much in it, that something like that won't help them. So it's not completely like poo-pooed by actual scientific minds, because there could be applications to those who are that zealous, you know?
Agreed. And I enjoy that too. There's a really great podcast I'm listening to right now called The Exorcist Files, about a real life exorcist. And he explains early on that the Catholic Church does not rule out mental health. Like it is one of the first things they need to rule out and say, all right, it's not a mental health issue. Like, well, thank you for at least believing in that, Catholic Church.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So, yeah.
The other tropes that, you know, across the board that worked kind of is the name is power thing. I like that. You got to find the demon's name to have power over it, to exercise it. Like that. Evil eyes. What do you think about the evil eyes in this one? Because I love the Exorcist evil eyes. This is the puke green, ultimately. But this one had like a dual eye thing where it looked like a reptilian eye almost alongside his.
Which is, I think, what they were going for is that, you know, it's like the snake. The devil took on the shape of the snake in the Garden of Eden. So it's got to be connected to that.
And as noted before, just the taunting I like in Exorcist, you ask the demon questions after it claims to like have knowledge, but then it can't answer the question, and you kind of like. Boom, put it in its place sort of thing. And I love how he really points out that demon hates jokes, so joke with them.
Yeah. There's a really great, now I'm going to forget it, of course, where Russell Crowe goes for the joke and he's like, you. weak, man. It's like, I forget what the joke is now, but it was this really great moment where he is trying to do the humor. And the devil's like, nope. Don't even start with me when you're
Another huge thing, which I wonder if the church does appreciate, is like all the priests in all these movies are drunks. They all just are drinking left and right here to get through this.
Yes, that is in almost every Exorcist movie as well, is that they have a flask of whiskey. It's in the other two movies I watched. It's there's no hiding the fact that priests like to drink.
Yes. Which is fun. You know, you got to characterize these guys.
Oh, yeah, they need some vice, right?
Yes.
Man.
But as a whole, I would say if you are a horror fan, it's worth a watch. If you aren't, definitely not. I don't know if there's redeemable for non-horror fans. What do you think?
I mean, if you're a Russell Crowe fan, I thought he did a great job.
Just for his performance,
His performance, his Italian is really good.
I know.
I was very impressed that they just, they didn't just skirt that and him having to use an Italian accent the entire movie. He
needed a redemption from Les Miserables, where he got all that shit for his accent in that one. But you're right. No, if you're a Russell Crowe fan, definitely check it out. I think that's all I got. And what else you got?
That's all I got. I mean, I kind of hope that they do a sequel. There, I said it. I mean, they're setting it up, and I really think if they went in a different direction and made this more of like an Indiana Jones meets the Da Vinci Code, you'd have something.
Okay, well, you know what? Now that you mentioned the possibility of a sequel, at the end he is given this map by the Pope of all like these hot spots. That makes sense. Okay. Then, if
that's
he's
what I was saying when they were trying
around, and it's definitely more like an adventure horror film versus being stuck in a bedroom like we are with all these movies. I would like that. I think that would be much more fun, more appealing.
100%. And that's what I was mentioning. Like when they were setting it up for a sequel, when they give him the map and they mentioned the other locations where they had the same issues. But if you made it more like the Da Vinci Code, where you're actually trying to figure out these mysteries, you'd have something really fun there.
And maybe utilize, as we mentioned earlier, the demon themselves and what is going on with the possession having to do with the demon powers that have been established.
Different demons should have different wants.
Right.
And different powers. And
that being said,
maybe this is a TV show.
Asmodeus is a demon of lust, which doesn't make any sense in the context of what we saw in the Pope's Exorcist. It would have made more sense in the Rite, but
Agreed.
Who's in the Rite he's just a prince of hell or something. It doesn't really have any sort of. That would have been good though. If he was the lust one in the Rite, then that makes sense with the whole incest baby situation. But there's potential. And I'm going to keep an open mind about it, but they need to bring something new in this subgenre for me to really give a damn.
I agree. I mean, it's just one of those genres that I don't know why I like it so much. I think maybe because the Catholic Church and the Bible has such a wealth of storytelling that it makes it interesting. Because again, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not practicing. There's just something really interesting about demons that I love.
Same. And maybe if they kind of like tied it more into what was going on in our contemporary society with zealousness, just give it a little bit of a richer, deeper meaning for me that it maybe would resonate with non-theistic people. Go in that direction a little bit instead of just hunkering down on theology. But
Agreed.
I digress.
Well, that's all we got. Thank you for listening to part 2 of The Pope's Exorcist. If you have a good recommendation for a exorcism movie, hit us up. I'm going to have all of our social media links. I'm just going to say from now on, look in the show notes of the podcast. You can find everything there, our handles, and thank you.
Heck yeah. And to add on to that, if you listeners have any ideas for casts, stuff we can talk about, we'd love to hear it. And
hit us up. We'll talk about anything and all things horrible. See what I did there?
I did. And until then, peeps, stay alive.